Hello and welcome to the Fierce and Fabulous Duo. My name is Dr. Tony, and I'm here with my co-host Sandra Katina. Hi, Sandra.
Hi, Tony.
Good morning. Well, in
Good
our
morning.
last video, we talked about an important topic, and we wanted to continue talking about this topic where when women are victimized, they don't always receive the support they should. And so today we wanted to focus a little bit about some laws that you may not be aware of around the world that really make it challenging for women to recover and receive support from their communities after being abused or raped. So we'd like to start with some of the history and then bring it to modern day, what's happening in the world today. So, Sandra, why don't you start us off, please?
Okay. We're going to go back to 1965 Sicily. A young 17-year-old girl was kidnapped, tortured, and repeatedly sexually assaulted. When her name was Franca Viola. When Franca was rescued, she was told that the only way to restore her honor was to marry her abuser. And this was called a rehabilitating marriage, where the rapist would escape justice by marrying his victim. And I had never heard of this before. Um, in Franca's case, the Catholic Church and her community pressured her to save her honor by marrying this man who abused her. She outright refused and took her abuser to trial. It was the first time it happened. Franca was the first woman in Italy who courageously fought against this heinous tradition. Because Franca took her abuser to trial, she was shunned, ashamed, and her family's property was burned down. Her attacker was convicted and sentenced to prison for 11 years. In 1981, this antiquated law was finally repealed. The rapist's name was Filippo Melodia, and he served 10 years of his 11-year sentence. 1 year after his release from prison, he was murdered execution style. His murderer was never caught. In 1968, Franca married and later had 3 children. Rehabilitating marriages still exist today in 20 different countries, which include Russia, Kuwait, Mali, Senegal, Thailand, and Venezuela. And Tony, you're familiar with rehabilitating marriages. I had never heard of them before. When I saw this story on the internet, I was absolutely blown to pieces about it. It was just horrific.
Yeah. And I think it's especially hard to understand when you live in the United States because we're such an individualistic society. But these other countries, if you notice the countries you mentioned, they're very collectivistic. So the primary
Yes.
concern is the family's honor. So these women, what's good for them, for their emotional well-being, for their physical well-being, is put to the side because the family's honor has to come first. So,
Mm,
that's part of some of these collectivistic mentalities, and thankfully, I'll say that many countries have repealed these laws. These laws used to be very common, and I was doing some research as
mm,
well when you shared this story with me, and I saw that Peru, a place I've lived, and my
mm.
husband is from there. It was only in 98 or was it 97 or 98 when they repealed the law, and then after that, Brazil in about 2005 and then Uruguay more recently. So there, when I see that as hopeful that, countries are starting and there's a lot of activism where women, unfortunately, it's oftentimes families of women who have been murdered or victimized who come and advocate for other women. So I'm glad to see that there are changes around the world. And I told you, Sandra, last week I was listening to the BBC News and I heard about this new law in Italy. And you just mentioned that this case was from Italy.
Mm,
And Italy
mm,
is now the first country in the European Union to pass this law where if a man kills a woman and they're able to investigate and see that this was femicide. This was due to her being in a position of, less power because she's a woman. If a man kills a woman and it's deemed femicide, he goes to jail for life. Previously, that didn't
Yeah.
happen. So, that's good because there's some justice. It's of course you can't give the life back,
Hmm.
but there's justice. And now
No.
there will be more accurate counts. Now we'll really be able to see how many cases because I've heard so many women say, men, okay, but it's harder to understand when women say, well, this husband didn't kill his wife because she's a woman. He killed a person. It's a person killing a person. But, there's always some power, a disconnect. There's a vertical relationship
Mm,
where the man is the money earner, he's more physically, he's stronger. So there's always something there that creates, this disconnect and this weakness that the woman is
mhm.
considered weak and she's killed by this man or
Yes.
husband or whatever. So I'm hopeful. I always try to bring some hope to the table, and when I saw this last week I said, wow, this is wonderful. I hope other countries now look to Italy as an example and pass laws as well. So this is a little bit about
Yeah.
the history we wanted to share, and Sandra and I also wanted to share on a more personal level, these experiences that I think all women, we're not all victimized in the same way, but to some extent we are in
Yeah.
different ways, whether you're whistled at going down the street, whether you're
Mhm.
pinched, you're touched, whatever. There are different levels of
Mhm.
it. But you have to be smart. You have to take measures into your own hands and protect yourself. And, few incidents stand out for me. And one was when I started living at the university at college. I was already maybe 20 when I moved into a dorm in Brooklyn, and I was living with a roommate, and we went out one night. It was Thursday night was a big night in the city to go out. All the college kids would go out to the bars and the clubs. And so my roommate and I were out and we met another girl and we were having a good time dancing, and it was getting late and we wanted to go, and she was with an older man, who knows this man's story, but she was about 20 like us and he looked to be 40 to 50, closer to 50. And I was naive. I said to my roommate, I said, well, we can't just leave her. I want to go too, but she's here.
Mhm.
She came out alone. She's here alone, and she's with this guy, and she's drunk. She's really drunk. And my friend was like, well, that's her fault. She came out alone, and
Mhm.
that she's asking for it. So that, I had never heard that before, being a 20-year-old, pretty protected.
Right.
And, it didn't sit well with me. And I went up to her and I said, we're leaving. What are you doing? And she stayed, I think if that happened, well, that these things wouldn't happen to me now. I don't go to these types of places anymore, but I think I would drag her out now and say, girlfriend, you're coming with me. But, eventually we left. She wasn't receptive to leaving. And sometimes I sit and wonder what happened to that girl. Um,
Mm.
she went out alone and she got drunk. So, not good. And, I've been out with other friends, and always the buddy system. That's one thing. The buddy system is key.
Mhm.
And I've had friends who were drugged. They didn't watch their drinks. And it was clear that, all of a sudden they were acting very strange and they were seeing things that weren't there, all kinds of strange
Mhm.
experiences. But we had the buddy system and we protected each other. So, I've personally never been drugged that I know of. I think I would know, but I've had friends, and thank God we've been there for each other. And I know, Sandra, you've through being a dance teacher, you've heard a lot of stories. So anything that stands out
Oh
to
yeah.
you?
Yeah. As mentioned in the last video, I was just shocked at how many women told me, and I won't go into detail, but they told me some incest, which unbelievable. Um, Sexual assault. They were raped. Um, I had dinner several months ago with an 85-year-old woman, someone I knew for many years, and she told me that when she was working in the corporate world, her boss said, "You need to take out this client tonight." And here's money, and he gave her petty cash, and he said, take him here, and wine him and dine him. And he slipped. They used to call it slipping a Mickey, now roofie. And she woke up with no clothes on, and she was sexually assaulted. And she was like 28 at the time, and she's 85 now. And she was talking with emotion. It was still there. These are things that people never get over. When I owned my dance school, I owned a dance school for 21 years in New York City. And during that time, I produced 40 dance concerts. And they were basically recitals. And I would have the smallest one, I had 8 students, and the biggest one, I had 40 students. And I would always, prep the girls, makeup, costumes, performing style, showmanship, because they were going on stage. And it wasn't just doing choreography. There's a lot more to it when you're performing on a stage. And every single time I would tell these women, you are safe because of me. I'm making sure that the environment I'm putting you in is safe. However, there was a time when a young dancer came to me and she said, "Oh, by the way, I was just hired by this club in Brooklyn, and I had just done a student teacher show, and nothing was right about that place. And I didn't know it because the woman, that so-called owner, she was a dancer too. And I never did business with her. She was from Jersey. I don't know her. She's married to an Egyptian guy. I get to the place. It was filthy. The food was absolutely disgusting. One of my students said, "Sandra, I ordered a drink and they came back. The glass had a chip in it." And I sent it back, and they wanted me to pay for another. Like, it was just a hellhole. And this so-called dancer who was married, that her husband, they were just creepy, and it was a really negative experience. My girls were protected, but I made sure to tell them, just watch your back at all times. I'm here, watch your back. So a week later, one of my other dancers came up to me and she said, "They want to hire me, that place that you have the big recital at." And I said, "Okay, here's what you're going to do. Listen to me very carefully, and please follow direction. You're going to walk in. You're going to be prepared to dance. You're going to have your costumes in a bag, whatever. You're going to go into your little crappy dressing room. It was like a dungeon. It was a little hole in the wall." I said, "You are not to drink anything from the bar. You're not to drink any alcohol. Someone comes up to you with drugs. No, no, and no. You to drink the water that you bring in a bottle. Stay away from these people. Don't hang out with them. Don't talk to them. Do your show and leave. And if they say, 'Oh, listen, we'd like to do, you to do a second show,' tell them, 'Oh, I have a wedding that I'm performing at.'" And when I saw her the next week in class, she came up to me and said, "Thank you so much for everything you told me. The place was worse even than you described it." And I never went back there. It was truly atrocious. But I would tell my dancers, because I trained a lot of professional dancers, and I would tell them, if you're going to work in a nightclub, bring your own water. Do not, if someone wants to buy you a drink, say, "Oh, excuse me, I have to get changed." Keep a real low key. Don't drink. These people, they've got cocaine, they've got ecstasy, they've got every drug under the sun. And 90% of my dancers said, "Sandra, I'm taking your advice. I'm not doing any of that stuff." But a few of the other girls said, "Sandra, that's crazy. I drink. I can have a drink." And I said, "You could do whatever you want because you're an adult, but you're my student. You're mine. I care about you. I want you to be safe. Do whatever you want, but know where, there are repercussions at times." And I did have a student who was roofied, and she was assaulted. And I was, I just, she was really young. She's 21 at the time, and he was 47, 48. And, this kid was one of the toughest people I knew. Tough, tough. So no one is immune.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, thanks for sharing that. And I know we've talked about tips and you mentioned another one. I mean, neither of us are drug users, but that's another thing that
No.
people start using drugs and that you don't know what's in these substances. So, don't
Yeah.
ingest anything. And I can't, I'll say
Right.
the same thing when I went out. Sometimes I like to order, what was that drink back then? A Long Island iced tea, which is disgusting
Oh,
because
that was
it's
so
everything mixed
famous.
together. But I always watched my drink. I never put it down.
Yes.
So, but of course, the
No.
best
No.
solution is not to drink, like you say, bottled water that has not been tampered. Make sure your your cap has not been
Yes.
tampered. It
Yep.
sound, we sound like we're crazy old ladies, but we've been there. We've seen things have happened to
Yeah.
women, and
Yeah.
sometimes I think, but by the grace of God, I'm here today because little
Yes.
little missteps I made could have cost me my life. Thank God they didn't. But
Yeah.
little
That's
thing, you'd look away or whatever, and it's really scary. And now, in Europe a few years ago, you and I talked about this. Girls were going out dancing and they were being injected. These guys
yeah.
had, syringes and they're injecting them, drugging them, and then taking them and
Mhm.
raping them. So you and more reason not to drink. You need to have your senses about you. You need to know
Yeah.
what is going on, who is around you, and if something feels off, it most likely is. If it doesn't feel right, get the hell out of there. Um, there's a reason we feel a certain way. People say, "Oh,
Mhm.
that's silly intuition," but it's true. It
Mhm.
really is true. Sometimes
Yes.
we can sense danger, and sometimes we don't listen to that instinct. But some of us do have it, stronger than others. But if it feels wrong, get out of there. Have your wits about you and don't go alone. Do not go alone. I know men
Mhm.
do it. I know it sucks. I had cousins who that go out dancing, male cousins, all through the night. But if I want to get
Yeah.
home in one piece, and I don't want to be harassed, because that's another thing. You can go out alone, you can do these things, but then do you
No.
want to have to deal with, the people bothering you at the very least,
Mhm.
it's being harassed. At the worst, it's being roofied, right? So,
Yes.
these are things that we've lived through and we've had friends live through and we thought it
Mm.
was important to share this with all of you. So Sandra, any last words for our viewers on this topic?
Well, I'd like to reiterate what you said. Gut reaction is always right. Whenever I didn't listen to my gut, things didn't go right. Listen to your instinct, to your gut reaction. Most important thing. And don't drink, don't smoke, don't get high. Now I sound like your grandma. But a lot of times things happen when people are inebriated. So this is not an NA or an AA meeting here, but we got to watch our backs. My beloved Grandmaster Reno Morales always said, never hung up with me before he said, watch your back. So be aware of your surroundings and
Hmm. Absolutely.
take heed.
Great advice. Well, thanks everyone for listening, and hopefully this is helpful information for all of you. Until the next episode,
I
goodbye.
hope so.
Bye.